most women are called to biological motherhood, and you need mothers to perpetuate the human species. We need to have families, we need children, they're the future.
I understand that, but you've said multiple times, if you're not going to have children, you should be celibate.
Yes, I do think that's true.
That's a personal choice. And for you to say, I am allowed to say what is right and wrong for another person is
that brings up
wild.
The abortion conversation. I will say, I think our choices affect more than just ourselves.
Because you're a woman, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and I just don't think that that's true.
I'm not trying to whitewash it that it's so easy and it's just all fun and games, but it is a lot of fun and games.
Do you think we should shift that societal mindset?
No. I think where we need to shift is in encouraging women to do what they think is right for themselves.
That was Lila Rose and Erika Abdelatif discussing motherhood versus choosing to be child-free. Erika is a co-host of the #1 followed child-free podcast, DINK. She and her childhood best friend, Kristen, passionately love to share about living a dual income, no kids lifestyle.
Our Regretful Parents series on YouTube. I'm Erika. Moms are telling us all the time, it takes a village, it takes a village. If everyone is a mother, I think it gets really difficult to have a thriving village.
Lila is a Catholic wife and mother, writer, founder, and pro-life activist. She's the founder and president of Live Action, a human rights nonprofit with the largest digital footprint on the globe for the pro-life movement.
What is the future of civilization? What is the purpose of life? What is all of this about? Listen, if everybody was a DINK today, we would not exist.
People who are child-free, it's most of the time this is not an easy decision.
Do you understand? I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining. Do you kind of see my reasoning?
You've
why
told
for
me that I should not be married and that it's unhealthy to have my podcast. So I understand where you're coming from. Do I disagree with you profoundly? Absolutely. I love my husband. I love being married.
We do not elevate motherhood the way that we used to.
Throughout history, women have not been able to make this choice for themselves.
This is the natural circle of life, right?
It's a very serious responsibility.
Why are you choosing not to have children?
There is so much expectation put on women.
There's 3,000 abortions a day, a million a year.
Not something we should perpetuate. Kids are not a retirement plan.
No, there's something wounded in your
We have
soul.
barely touched on men in this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Should the potential for regret be considered when making the choice to have children or not? Will these two see eye to eye on anything? Welcome to the Ellen Fisher Podcast. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. The best way you can support this podcast is subscribe and share. So if you like what you see here, then please do me a favor and click the subscribe button, and I will continue to do my best bringing you more and more dynamic interviews and thought-provoking debates. I really appreciate it. All right. Thank you, Erika and Lila, for coming onto my podcast. I am very excited for this conversation, an ever-evolving conversation, I feel like, especially now with social media and DINK being a thing, like what that's called, motherhood and all that is talked about online in many different ways, both positive and negative. So to start out, Erika, can you please explain for those listening who don't know what a DINK is?
Yes.
What is that?
It's funny. DINK actually originated in the 1980s, but it stands for dual income, no kids. So it describes both child-free by choice couples, but also couples who don't have kids yet.
Awesome. And Lila, do you think motherhood is ideal for all or most women?
I do think motherhood's ideal for most women. Not all, but for most. And there's a few reasons for that. I think, first of all, women are all called to a kind of motherhood, not necessarily biological, but definitely also spiritual, because we're called, I think, as human beings to love other people, and our ability to think outside of ourselves and turn our love and focus to someone else the way we were maybe mothered to help other people is kind of a universal vocation. But I do think most women are called to biological motherhood. That doesn't mean they're going to necessarily, if you get married, you're going to be able to have kids. Of course, there's infertility. That's a huge burden for a lot of couples. But 80% of American women are mothers right now, which is beautiful. And you need mothers to perpetuate the human species. We need to have families. We need children. They're the future. And so it's an incredibly beautiful vocation and an incredibly beautiful state in life to be a mother.
What do you think about that?
I don't personally have an issue with that. I mean, we'll get into this more later, but I have a ton of respect for mothers. I think motherhood is a tremendously difficult job. And so I really admire people who choose that path in life. I also agree that, we have a calling to be in community with other people. And I think for some people, motherhood is a great path, but I don't necessarily think that it has to be an imperative for all women.
All right, this is a question for both of you. According to the National Center for Family and Marriage Research, women in their 40s without children has nearly doubled from 1980 to 2022. Why do you think there's a rise in women not having children? I'll ask you first.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that all of us, when our mothers were born, lived in a time when they could not open a bank account without a male cosigner. And so I think historically there was an economic framework that didn't allow women to make the choice to be child-free if that was their choosing. I mean, you even look at the Salem witch trials, for instance. A lot of those women were murdered for their choice to not take a husband and not have a family. And so I think for a lot of women who are choosing that today, this is really the first generation where women have the ability and framework to make that decision for themselves in a way that a lot of our ancestors were not able to. So I think that's the first place that we have to look. I think the second thing that we have to consider is like, for Gen Z and millennial women especially, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this just as much as I am, there are so many obstacles in the way of choosing to start a family for people who want that path. Wages are stagnant. Housing is expensive. The cost of food is going up. Like, there are so many obstacles in the way. And we hear from a lot of people that they would like to start a family, but they don't feel like they have the stability or the ability to do so. And I'm totally compassionate and understanding of that. I think there's also just like a lot of social issues that my generation feels haven't been addressed well enough, from climate change, from the division of labor between genders. I'm very compassionate towards that. And I think, there's a multitude of reasons, but I think what it boils down to is just like either women are finally being given the freedom to make this choice, or they're, feeling burdened by the state of the world and not fully prepared to start a family in the current climate.
I think, well, first of all, I wanted to say, I should have already said this. Thank you, Ellen. And thank you, Erika, for doing this. It's really a very fun and I think an awesome conversation. Yeah. So excited to dive more in. I actually agree with a lot of the things you're saying, Erika. I think you're making a great point about the fact that historically, there have been women who have chosen to not get married, to not have kids. And that's not an innately bad thing. It actually can be a very good and beautiful thing. And, it's interesting, like, some of my heroes actually are virgin martyrs. So talking about faith for a minute, there is this beautiful vocation for Christians of celibacy, which is becoming, your spouse is basically our Lord Jesus, and you're not going to get married. You're not going to have kids. And that's a really beautiful, elevated vocation, but you're not doing it because, the economy's bad, or, I just want to go on vacations or something. Obviously, you're doing it because you want to be a spiritual mother and give back in a different way, and be totally dedicated to other people in a different way. So that, I think, is a really beautiful framework. And there were actually these women who were, you mentioned the Salem witch trials, actually, like in the Roman Empire, there were the virgin martyrs who said, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids. I feel called to marry Jesus, and I feel called to give up my life for the church in this way and other people. And some of these women were literally murdered as well. Yeah. So we're aligned in that. That's wrong.
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen. Totally. And some women are called to not marry, and they're called because they're not called to marry. They're also called to not have biological children. But I think we do share a universal vocation, like I was talking about earlier, to love. And that looks like a radical self-gift to other people in the end. And, we're born into families. Of course, we're all born here into families, and we're called to love family, of course, and serve family. But there are other people that may choose to not have their own family in order to serve families. And that can be really beautiful. That being said, when you mentioned this thing about the economy, and this is all real issues, inflation is crazy. It's so hard to support a family today. I mean, there have been economic shifts in the last few decades that have been really difficult for people. Those are all real things.
Totally.
And that is really heartbreaking to me, because I think most people are called to get married. Most people are called to be open to life and have children. And it is tough for families today. So I think one of the solutions, instead of saying don't get married, the solution is let's work on valuing family more and work on promoting policies that support families more on the political side, and being pro-family as a society to make it easier for families. It's going to be hard, right? But to make it give them as much support as we can give them.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other reasons why you think it might be increasing? Is it mostly economic, do you think? Or do you think there may be some influence on social media or something else that might be influencing the culture?
I have some thoughts. I'm sure.
Please.
Are you
go
sure?
First,
okay.
Yeah.
I do think the social media era has made a lot of people have expectations or ideas about what they need, what lifestyle needs to look like in order to be a parent or even to get married. I mean, it's like the whole wedding thing, spending, literally your entire, bank account on your wedding or going into debt for your wedding, going into debt for college, like all of the people who are just like burdened with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt with college, which by the way, you can't give that debt up in bankruptcy. Any other debt can be dissolved in bankruptcy except for college debt. So you are saddled with it for life. So I think the way that's our academia setup is it's been said it's a scam. It's a little bit scammy for a lot of people. And that's really a reality. But I think it's expectations of lifestyle is one thing. You in order to be a mom today, you need to be able to, have this beautiful Pinterest house and do all these, Pinteresty lifestyle things. And there's a standard that we're constantly being bombarded with through, God bless it, social media. I know we're all on it. And that is not helpful to a lot of women. It's really tough for them. And that breaks my heart too, because I have good friends who they're making it on one income, but they're not living the lifestyle of a lot of other people around them. They're not going on the fancy vacations. They don't drive the 2 cars. They don't have this big house. Many of them are renting. And they're living modestly. They're not eating out, but they're designing their life so that they can be open to life and have children as best they can. And their focus is family first. And I do think that's really beautiful. It's not getting like the headlines or, being like featured on the Instagram feeds, but I think that is actually the future of civilization is family. And so I think those moms in general deserve a lot of credit for them saying yes, even when it's difficult.
I mean, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying. I think, the only other thing that I can really think is a reason that we're hearing from listeners about why they're choosing to not have kids, other than the economic reason, is a lot of the women that we talk to feel like men aren't really stepping up to their role in relationships. And I hear from a lot of women who are not dinks, who are sinks or oinks, as they like to call themselves, who have kind of given up on dating because they feel like it's hard to find a partner who shares their values, who shares what they want in life. And I think that's a valid reason also. Like if you feel like you can't find someone who is of quality to settle down with, I wouldn't encourage a woman to settle down with someone that they didn't feel passionately about. So yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to boil it down into one specific thing because there is just such a multitude of issues that people are facing. Obviously, myself as like a social media manager, like I have a hard time demonizing social media, especially
I'm on it too. So
yeah,
we're not demonizing it, but it is tough for a lot of people because of the
not to say that you're demonizing it. I apologize if that's how it sounds, but like, my husband and I have this conversation all the time. Like social media is the root of so many evils. But at the same time, it's a great thing. And I think,
exactly.
For women who don't want to have children, for women who don't feel that calling, to have a place where you feel like you can find connection and you can find a narrative that is relatable to you, I think that's a great thing. And so I don't want to say that it's, I think social media is causing all these women to choose to not be mothers because, they want to travel or whatnot. I'm not saying that some women aren't doing that, but I think generally speaking, I think it's bigger world issues that are causing people to make that choice.
Do you have thoughts about the settling down, not finding a man that's worth settling down with?
I definitely have thoughts about that. A lot of thoughts about that. And one other thought too is I think a lot of women are, I think as a society today, we do not elevate motherhood the way that we used to. And I do think the status of being a mother was more seen as a beautiful, good, awesome thing to aspire to a century ago more than today. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's a bad thing. And I know that you mentioned like bank accounts and, early feminism, ensuring women's, kind of equal economic rights to men, things like that. And I think it's good that women can have a bank account and vote on all of these things. But where it went wrong, in my view, was the sexual revolution and this whole idea that sex is not connected to marriage or children. Sex is recreational and you can just do it as you want. It's casual, whatever. That's empowerment. And then women, we don't need men. We don't need families. We don't need nothing. We're good on our own and screw the men, And again, I'm not saying that's all women saying that, obviously not, but that there is this trend of that today. And I think that's a really poisonous narrative. And I do think it's affected women today. Not all, but it's affected some women today. And it makes me sad because I think women ultimately, the social data shows us that couples with children, as an example, are 11% higher on the happiness self-ranking than couples without children, as an example. And then married adults are 17% more likely to report being thriving than single adults, right? So there is social data that shows you that motherhood, marriage, these things are good for the human person, where they're natural for us. But when there's these societal messages saying you don't need a man, or children are a burden, and they're going to be such a weight, you can't handle it, I think that is actually really poisonous messaging for women today.
If you're like me, you care about what goes into your body. But what about what goes into your home? That's why I love Natuary, where nature meets high-performance home care. Everything they make is bio-based, biodegradable, and free of hormone disruptors, so you don't have to choose between safety and real results. Their household cleaning concentrate is a total multitasker. One bottle for your counters, floors, bathrooms, you name it. But what really sets it apart is the probiotic difference. Most cleaners wipe everything out, leaving surfaces sterile and vulnerable. Natuary does the opposite. It adds beneficial probiotics, the good bacteria that stay behind and keep working. These probiotics actually wake up when they sense dirt or spills and produce enzymes that break it down, so your home stays cleaner for longer. It's like a continuous clean, even after you're done wiping. And then there's their laundry system. Aside from just being the most beautiful laundry package I've ever seen, it's also packed with amino acid surfactants and plant enzymes that lift stains like grease, food, or grass, but rinse completely clean, leaving no residue behind. Instead of covering odors with synthetic fragrance, it uses zinc ricinoleate, derived from castor oil, to actually neutralize odor at the source. Everything is fragrance-free, cruelty-free, vegan, and designed beautifully. The refillable glass bottles are the kind you want to keep on your counter. Sustainable, simple, and beautiful. You can explore their starter kits at natuary.com. That's natuary.com. And use my code ELLEN for 10% off your first order. So join me in experiencing what it feels like to clean without compromise with Natuary.
I struggle with the language that is poisonous for people, because on the flip side, I think pressuring someone to do something that they don't want to do, that they don't have an interest in doing, is not only bad for the woman, it's also bad for the child. And as somebody who does have a deep love for children and cares very much about the well-being of children, I think if you can't fully commit to that with your whole heart, I don't think it's benefiting anybody. And so I think, the flip side, where we pressure women to have kids that they don't want, that's harmful to children and it's harmful to women. And so, I think a better framework from my perspective is ensuring that women have the resources that they need to do what they think is best for themselves. No one can be an expert for your life the way that you can. And so I don't feel comfortable mandating what is right or wrong or natural or unnatural for anybody. I think that's a deeply personal thing that people need to feel confident making choices for themselves. So yeah, I think, I struggle with the idea that leveling up one side more than the other, because I agree, motherhood is an incredibly important thing to society. I will say this a million times during this conversation. I care so much about mothers. Kristen, my co-host, and we talk all the time on the podcast about how we need to resource women so much more in the workforce, in society, the way the government frameworks things. Women need so much more care than we're giving them. And I think at the end of the day, we've been so limited in our ability to choose what we do with our bodies that needs to be the priority, not pitting women against each other, their position in life, their, choices, but saying, let's make sure that women have the opportunity to do what they think is right for themselves.
I mean, I agree that we shouldn't be, banging people over the head and pressuring them to you get married right now. Obviously, and some women, we were talking about the dating, they would like to get married, but they're just having trouble finding a guy. So that's a very real issue. But I do think we should be real about the fact that there are a lot of women today who regret not getting married and who regret not being able to have children. And there are a lot of women who I think were really influenced by this narrative that children are just kind of a lifestyle choice. And, you can be so happy having this career and just traveling and being with friends and having your kind of chosen friendship community, and that's going to be your lifelong reward. And you're look back at your life at 80 and be all chill with that. Like, a lot of people are not having that experience. And a lot of the social data is bearing that out, that people are reporting more happiness, more satisfaction, and all of these factors when they are choosing this universal vocation to love via marriage and being open to children. And so it's not so much about pressuring as it is about being honest, in my view, because I do think that modern feminism, and I'm not talking about early stage feminism, I'm talking about like the post-sexual revolution feminism, which I believe is toxic, is sending this message to a lot of women that you're going to be happiest when you are fully in control and you get to call every shot every day. You don't have to wake up and hear a baby crying or wake up and have a man to take care of or whatever. Like, you're fully happy when you're like living your dreams, your best life, girl boss, all this stuff. And dreams are beautiful. Careers can be beautiful. Girl bossing can be beautiful. Like, I'm not saying those things can't be beautiful, but I am saying that what is the most important thing in life is relationships with other people. And the most natural order for relationships for most women is going to be marriage and children. Again, not all, but for most. And if we tell women, it's kind of 50-50, whatever, I think that is not a true message to give to women.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I have a question for you afterwards.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I think 95% of child-free women don't end up regretting their choice. 95% live with a lot of satisfaction and happiness. And that's in the current climate. What
age are those women at? I'm curious, though, when they're surveyed.
I want to believe that it's up to 45, but I could be wrong.
But that doesn't really surprise me because, not to interrupt, but at 45, you're like, okay, I'm still living it. I'm talking about like 55, 65, 75. That's half. There's another half of your life left.
Totally. And that's part of what I think is really difficult about the conversation about regret is we really haven't had enough history and time for women to be able to be accurately represented in society to make those decisions. That said, listen to our podcast. We do a series where we have older women who are in their 80s, 90s come on and talk about their experiences. And overwhelmingly, they are very happy with their decision. I think,
well, they probably not to push back on that too much, but you probably aren't having a woman in her 70s who had abortions or didn't have children and come on and express regret because you're a DINK podcast. I mean, I don't know if you've talked to those women before, or like invited them on the show, but like women who regret not having children.
Sure, but on the flip side, there are women who regret having children. If you look at the Regretful Parent sub or the I Regret Having Children Facebook page, like, there are countless posts from people who deeply regret having children. And to me, if I grow up, or I'm grown.
One day we will all grow up.
If I get to my 70s and my 80s and I live with regret, I'm only hurting myself. I'm the only person who is harmed by that decision. If I have children and I regret that decision, that's profound. And I take that really seriously.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think all regret is profound. Like, because there's there's like a signal saying something's wrong here. But I would say if someone who has a baby or has a grown child and is 80 years old and regretting that, then I think that's a question of a mindset shift for that person. That's not like, oh yeah, I guess you shouldn't have had that kid. Too bad they're alive right now. It's like more, there's something wounded in your soul where you're seeing this human being, your own flesh and blood, by the way, who is just, beautiful gift, right? And you're regretting their existence. I think that shows more of a moral issue in their soul that they need to resolve, maybe in the privacy of their heart before God or talking with a trusted counselor or spiritual advisor or friend. That's what I would say about that. But when you're an older person and we're doing a mass social experiment right now on women today. We really are. This is like unprecedented in human history that this many children are childless. This many children are like, and some of them are not childless by choice. That's a heartbreaking. Some of them are childless because of infertility or they want to be married and they can't find a good guy. But there are women who are like, I'm childless by choice. And the number of those women is a social experiment. And that's what I'm concerned about. Like, what's going to happen to these women decades from now? And how is that going to impact them and then impact the people around them?
And you're welcome to have that viewpoint. but I think at the end of the day, like, you're not the expert on their life. And I think it's a little unfair to say that they're like wounded, because I totally understand and respect where you're coming from, but I don't think that you have the authority to claim that about somebody else's choices.
And to clarify, you're saying the women who have children who regret it would be wounded, but you're not. Are you saying that also about someone who chooses not?
No, to clarify, you're right. I don't know individual stories, like, because there's going to be a lot of different stories.
Of course.
But I'm saying, collectively speaking, because of the narratives and the positioning, both economic issues, that's a real thing. Obviously, the ideology of feminism is another thing. There's modern feminism. I think we are in social experiment territory with the number of children, the number of women who are childless by choice more than other times in human history. And it's not childless by choice because, I'm going to go and, live a celibate vocation and then, serve the community as sort of like a spiritual mother figure. It's more like I'm childless by choice, and maybe she's had abortions. She's childless by, she had a child, but there's abortions involved, or she's childless by choice and she's just like, I want to just live my life on my terms. And that sort of detachment from like community structures of family, community structures of serving the younger generations very intentionally. You have other responsibilities. It's not just about you and what you do in the morning. It's about other people you're serving. Mm-hmm. Like being untethered from that, so many people today, I think, is a social experiment. And I think it's not good at large. I can't judge individual people's hearts, of course not. But at large, I think we are getting into dangerous territory for people, for their own sakes and for the rest of society.
If you'd like to respond, you can, or I have a pointed question for you that might be a good segue.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going.
But obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of that. So
Okay.
And I so appreciate you just being,
totally.
Tell me what you disagree with. Let's talk.
Yes, totally.
For sure.
What's the most rewarding thing for you personally about consciously choosing to not have children? And how did you and your partner come to that decision?
I'm going to start with the second part because I think it will lead into the first part.
Okay.
And I think it's going to address a lot of the things that you're talking about.
This feels like a good time for that question.
100%. Because I think I think when we're talking about the child-free issue, there's a lot of misconceptions from my perspective as somebody who talks to child-free people every single day of why people are child-free. And I think that there is a misrepresentation that everybody who's choosing to be child-free is doing that because they want to live. Are we allowed to curse on this?
I think so.
Okay. We're allowed to be middle fingers up and say we hate men, we hate kids, we want to travel, we want to be bougie. That's just not the reality that I see when I talk to child-free women. For me, I actually came to this decision in my late 20s. I should clarify for people who are watching this that I grew up in a great family. I have a very good relationship with my parents. I had a very privileged upbringing in Orange County. And I just, by the nature of living, always assumed that I would have children. I thought that's just the natural course of life, and that's just the way that my life will move. For me, after I graduated from college, I spent the next several years actually working as a families pastor, working with hundreds of children, working with foster kids, working with people in other countries, working with kids who live in the inner city. And as a privileged person, going and seeing so much suffering, it was eye-opening for me. Working with so many mothers, so many women, and seeing their struggles day in and day out, even if they loved it, recognizing that that's the hardest possible job. It's a very serious responsibility. And for me, I realized when I survey my life, I have no doubt that I could be a good mother. But I also recognize I could be good at a lot of other things. And I think we live in a time when we tell people, you can have it all. You can do everything you want to do. And you can do it great. And I don't want to say that that's a toxic mindset, but I think it's unrealistic. And so when I surveyed my goals and what I wanted out of life, I really realized that if I tried to do everything, I would be sacrificing something. And so I had to make a hard decision about what was right for my life and make a decision about where I think my talents are best served. Are my talents best served being a mother, or are they in community, being a village. And I think that's a little bit of, if I'm honest, like my beef with this conversation, because I so frequently talk to tired mothers. We have mothers in our DMs who listen to our podcast and have a lot of thoughts on motherhood. And I listen to these women and I think, moms are telling us all the time, it takes a village, it takes a village. If everyone is a mother, I think it gets really difficult to have a thriving village. We have so many people in our audience who, I think we did a poll once, and I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but we did a poll once in our audience just asking people solely like, for your profession, for your line of work, are you in some kind of like service-based career? And it was overwhelming that most of the people in our audience are doctors, nurses, teachers, nannies, healthcare workers, people who are serving their community in a very deep, spiritual, serious way. And I think, people who are child-free, it's like most of the time, this is not an easy decision. As much as it may seem that way, I think for a lot of people, they're recognizing that, and I realize I'm talking really long, but I think okay. For a lot of people, they're recognizing that they have a decision to make, and to choose to not be a mother in many ways puts you outside of society, like you're saying.
Well, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Sorry, but I feel like that's a heartbreaking thing that you're saying.
I'm saying that because it's outside of the social norm. And so to choose not to do that, it raises questions for people, and there's judgment, there's stigma there. And so it's not an easy decision for people to make. And I think a lot of times when people are making this decision, it's not out of selfishness. It's not out of a desire to just go live this bougie life. Surely there are some people who do feel that way. But I think the majority of people who are making this choice are making it out of a deep compassion for the place that we're in the world, and recognizing that they do want to give back to their communities. They do want to have a deep sense of connection to their community. And the way that they feel like they can do that best is through not having children, so that they have that time and they have those resources to be able to give back.
So what you're describing does sound like a different narrative than I see some sort of DINK creators promote, which is the it's dual income, no kids lifestyle. So it's about, we have extra resources now as a family to do the things that we would like to do. We have more time at our disposal to do the things that we would like to do. So I think there's actually a beautiful element to what this other thing you're describing, which is, okay, I have chosen as a woman to live a life where I'm not going to have children. I'm not, and I would say celibacy should be part of that, by the way, because there's no fail-proof birth control. So if you're going to be a person who's not open to life, then I don't think you should be married. I don't think you should be a celibate. And so that's one element, right? But let's say there's that woman. And I think I was just talking about those women earlier. Like, there are women in history, and certainly women today. I think about, for example, a very lovely friend of mine who's a religious sister, and literally her whole thing is, I'm giving up the vocation of marriage and children because I'm saying this deeper yes to loving other people in this other way, and being helping families and helping the community and helping the church and all these things. I think that's really beautiful. And by the way, you can be celibate and single without becoming a nun too.
Sure.
Like, I'm not saying it's either marriage or none. That's actually not the case either. Like, you can just be a celibate single woman and say, I'm going to really focus on giving back to my community in these intentional ways. And now I would encourage them to go deep in faith and discover with God like their unique purpose, because there are also like consecrated virgins. There's these different kind of beautiful vocations that women, I think, can have and men can have. But anyways, all that to say, I'm a little curious about what you're saying, because at the beginning you were saying you were doing all this beautiful work with helping, children in foster care, which that's beautiful, helping mothers who are struggling, which is beautiful. And that gave you this sense of that later on you didn't want to have kids, if I understood you correctly. I don't know. I want to make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I realize it at the end of the day, it comes down to a decision of where do I want to put my resources? Because while some people can do both, I know myself, I know that I would be a miserable nightmare to be around if I both had to raise children and go about doing all these extra activities for my community.
So are you saying, like, right now you're doing all this foster care work and this care work with, because I just want to make sure I'm tracking, because I know you have the DINK podcast, but you're saying you're trying to invest your time in like this work with mothers and foster, I don't know if you're doing foster care support, or the reason I'm going down this route and trying to understand is because it's like for my place, right? So I have 3 beautiful kids. Thank God. I've got 1 kid in heaven, miscarriage. And my husband and I, we do a lot of things beyond parenting. We both have jobs. We both work. My work also involves mission work, supporting moms and babies in need. We do a lot of education work, support a ton of different charities. But we also have kids. Now, are there trade-offs? Is it easy? No, I'm not going to pretend it's like life is easy. Every day is a vacation, but every day is incredibly beautiful and meaningful. And I know, Ellen, as a working mom, I know you're not trying to insert yourself into the conversation, maybe, but like we talk about it being difficult.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
not going to sit here and pretend motherhood is easy, or motherhood and managing, work and economic contributions to the household while also managing support of the community, like bringing a meal over to a friend and volunteer work. It's full. It's full. But I would say that fullness is what's beautiful and I think good for most women. And again, not all. We're not all talking all, but for most women. And to tell women that you can't be giving back to your community, you can't do meaningful work and be a mother, I don't think that's true.
I'm not saying that you can't do both. I
Okay.
definitely agree that you can, and you're a great example of that. I think for me, it would be too much. Knowing myself, knowing my unique abilities, I know that it would be too much for me. And so hats off to you. I think it's really
there's a ton
impressive.
of other women. I'm not like putting myself on some pedestal, but this is the reality for a lot of mothers. But I would just say, again, I'm not going to say I don't know what's best for you personally. Like that's between you and God, truly.
Surely.
What I can say largely, though, I can tell you, I can say there's certain decisions that I know would be bad decisions, like that are objectively a bad decision. One objectively bad decision, in my view, would be abortion. Saying I want to be childless by choice, so I got pregnant with this baby, so I'm going to kill it, right? And I do know that happens, and that's heartbreaking. So there are things that I would say this is objectively wrong, right? And I do think there are some moral black and whites, and then there's a lot of prudence, like decisions that people can make around that. But I think that nobody can have it all in the sense that they can have everything that in the world, but I think everybody can have everything that God has for them. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be more than enough in the end. Yeah. But it requires people getting really deep in their hearts between them and God of, Lord, God, first of all, God, are you real? God, are you there? Like coming to, I believe, a belief in God. And then also understanding, what is God calling me to? Mm-hmm. What is his call? And then understanding there is a moral universe. It's not like a billion rules, but there are some clear rules about human relationships and human behavior. And if I can live in accordance with these guidelines that are going to help me be free and choose the good, and then discover God's deep purpose for my life, then I am going to discover it's going to be maybe hard, but life is going to be beautiful and full of peace and joy.
This episode is brought to you by Anima Mundi Herbals, founded by Costa Rican herbalist Adriana Ayales. They craft the most beautiful adaptogens, teas, and elixirs you could imagine for every conscious home. All made in the U.S. with certified organic, wild-crafted, and sustainably harvested plants. Their products are vegan and gluten-free with zero fillers, binders, or natural flavors. Even their packaging is eco-friendly in a gorgeous recyclable glass or biodegradable bags. Personally, I'm obsessed with their bug spray pre and post bite. It's deep-free, drama-free, and packed with pure botanicals like citronella, lavender, cypress, and rose geranium, so you can stay connected to nature without compromise. It smells fresh, feels grounding, and actually works and is perfect for me living in the tropics of Hawaii. Their apothecary now has over 200 herbs sourced from around the world, and you can visit them in Brooklyn or Venice. Click the link in my bio and use the code Ellen for 15% off your first order at Anima Mundi Herbals. Trust me, your skin and your spirit will thank you. Okay, Lila, what's the most rewarding thing for you personally being a mother?
I mean, I was just thinking about like the vision this morning of cuddling with we have a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and they all hop into bed with us in the morning usually. Well, I have to go get the 1-year-old from her crib. She's calling for me early in the morning. But I mean, I am kind of flabbergasted by how much a gift a child is. And yes, I'm not trying to whitewash it that it's so easy and like it's just all fun and games, but it is a lot of fun and games. It really is. Like having children is this adventure. It's risky. Like you don't know what's going to happen. Like, it feels dangerous. You're like worried about your kids, but it's incredibly beautiful because you have these souls that you are uniquely entrusted with. And I do believe that God doesn't give us something that we can't handle. And I do think every child is a gift, and God does make a way for moms and dads. Things can get really difficult, but God does make a way. So yeah, I mean, just every day my husband are like, this is so like, it's so amazing that they are fun. They're beautiful. They're just total blessings. And I mean, there's nothing that I've done. I've been blessed to be a part of some really amazing work that I think is very important, helping people, helping save lives. But when I look into my children's eyes, it's like there is nothing more important than the opportunity I've been given to nurture you, this other human being. And I'm not a perfect mom. I'm figuring it out every day. But
yes. Okay, well, I have a question for both of you. What would you recommend to a woman or a couple who is on the fence about deciding whether or not to have children?
I can go. A couple things. I think first and foremost, I think I should clarify too that I am no longer religious, but I have a lot of deep respect and admiration for people who are. So I personally think going to therapy finding a trusted therapist is a very good decision. I think being able to be in a safe space with another person where you can talk about your fears, you can talk about your concerns, and have somebody who can work through that with you is great. I also think that it's really important that you have very honest conversations with your partner about those fears and concerns, as well as expectations for how you want to divvy up labor and what your, specific, how you see the gender roles playing out. Because I do think that that's a big issue. A lot of people wait until the child is there, and then it creates issues. So I think the more that you can think through, the more that you can talk with your partner about it, the better. I think there's also a lot of really great resources. There's a book called The Baby Decision that provides a non-biased framework for people to be able to explore that choice. There's tons of podcasts. There's also a lot of classes. I know Orna Dunath, she's an Israeli sociologist who has done a lot of work around regretful motherhood, as well as helping people make a non-biased decision for their lives. And so she leads a lot of workshops, and she has a lot of materials that are really, really valuable. On top of that, I would say, if you're on the fence, our first season of Dinky was really me being staunchly child-free and my co-host Kristen being on the fence. And the whole first season, we just laid out the data, the finances, the statistics behind it. And so it's all an exploration about how do you make that decision for yourself? And we have a lot of honest conversations, and we've recommended that to a lot of people. And I think it's helped a lot of people make a decision one way or the other.
Cool. I want you to reply. But thank you both for sharing, by the way, which I'm remaining neutral as the purpose of this podcast, obviously, but I appreciate you both sharing your own personal experience on why you love being a mother and why you love being a DINK. Is that weird to say you're a DINK, or why you love choosing not to have kids?
Yeah.
Yes. So,
I have a quick question for you, Erika. It sounds so, my understanding of your podcast, because I was able to, Helen's like, we're going to be talking with Erika. And so I was looking up your work. My understanding is you're obviously not telling women what to do, but you're saying these are all the good reasons to consider being a DINK. When you say lay out the data, regretful mothers.
The first season was really about exploring the decision, because my co-host hadn't made the decision yet, whether she wanted to be child-free or not. We're now into the 8th season. She has decided to be child-free. And so we now see ourselves not as a place where we're trying to convince people to not have children, because again, I don't think that's my place to make that decision for anybody, as much as we're trying to create a sense of community among people who have made this choice and maybe feel isolated, or like the stigma is leaving them in a place where they don't feel like they have a strong sense of connection to people who are like-minded. So we don't see ourselves as a place where we're trying to tell anyone, don't be a mom. If that's your passion, if that's what you want to do, I think that's great. But we want to really provide resources to people who are choosing this for themselves.
So you're trying to reach people who have already chosen it, or you're trying to, because you were saying the first season was exploring all the reasons. The reason I ask is I'm curious if you've had women on the show, probably not, but maybe that are like, motherhood's amazing. This is why you should go for motherhood, and marriage is amazing, and motherhood, or more it's focused on this is all the
for people who have chosen to be child-free.
Okay.
I think there's a place for those conversations, but it's not Dinky.
Okay. But I think that's the thing though, right?
Yeah.
Because listen, if everybody was a DINK today, we would not exist.
Sure.
Civilization would collapse in a flaming pile of garbage, you know, like not garbage, but things would be really bad economically. We'd have an aging population that didn't have anyone to care for them. We would literally just human civilization would collapse. So I think that it's one thing to pursue the celibate life and say, I'm going to be focused on I'm not having my own biological children because I'm serving other people. Mm-hmm. That is my I'm still in relationship with other people. I'm serving other people. And that they feel their calling. And I think that could be very beautiful and amazing. But I think it's another thing to say, kids are a lot. I have maybe issues internally with the idea of motherhood. I have a job. Economically, I'm not like struggling and like barely able to, get clothes for myself. It's not like, oh, I can't afford it. It's more just like, I've got a dual income. I've got all this money. I've got all these things, and I just don't want to go there. And I do think that is a message that is counterproductive for most people today, because it's basically saying like, it is that message we were talking about earlier. And I know we were having some back and forth on it, but saying, my life is about me, and this is how you do the me life, So, I
think it's unfortunate that you feel that way, to be honest.
I maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but do you explore in the DINK podcast, this is how we support other families, this is how we support moms, this is what we do to volunteer? Is that the kind of focus of it?
Sure. Yeah. We talk about social issues really frequently, but I also would say, like, as we know, as you guys know, there are a million podcasts for mothers. Should we expect mothers to say, let's bring child-free people on to talk about their child-free experience? If that's what they want, but that's not the point of the podcast, just the way that our podcast isn't for moms to come express. There's a time and a place for that, but I don't think that's what we're trying to do.
I think where I'm kind of getting at here is elevating being child-free for the sake of being child-free.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think is problematic, because it's seeing children, we were all children once. We needed someone to care for us. Sure. The only reason you're here is because your mother said yes to you. My mother said yes to me. Your mother said yes to Ellen. Thank God, right? We're all here. We owe our existence to mothers, right? So I think, again, not everyone's called to be a mother. Some people aren't even able to be mothers. But I think this idea of elevating child-free by choice for the sake of being child-free by choice, I think that is ultimately unhealthy for a society.
That's fine. You can feel that way. I think...
Do you understand? I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining. Do you kind of see my reasoning?
You've told me that I should not be married and that it's unhealthy to have my podcast. So I understand where you're coming from. Do I disagree with you profoundly? Absolutely. Yeah. I love my husband. I love being married. I love my life. And I think for me, what we talked about earlier, throughout history, women have not been able to make this choice for themselves. To be the first generation where women have the opportunity to choose freely for themselves without the permission of a man what they want to do, of course I'm proud of that. Of course I'm proud of that. And I want other women to be able to make the choice that they think is best for themselves. If that's motherhood, we are cheering you on. Kristen and I are the biggest advocates for paid maternal and paternal leave. We're the biggest advocates for lessening how much people work because it's damaging. And so I don't want to say that like we're raising this army of child-free women to say like, F you to society, because that's absolutely not what we're doing. But for women to feel a sense of pride that they can take ownership over their lives and what they want, I would never apologize for that. And if you think that's wrong, you're welcome to feel that way. It only motivates me more to do what I'm doing. Yeah. Because so much of society feels the way that you feel.
Well, and I would say I think a lot of society today sees motherhood and treats motherhood as not a great thing. And I think that's what I'm concerned about here, because the real cost of all of this isn't me, isn't Ellen, isn't you. The real cost of all of this is kids, is children.
And the difference is,
and that's really, I'm coming in here with their interest. And yes, obviously I want women to feel fulfilled and happy, and I want them to have all the knowledge and information. And ultimately, no one should be forced to have a child. No one should be forced. I agree with that. But if you have a child, by the way, if you're pregnant, you have a child, you have a child. So I'm obviously against abortion. I just want to clarify that, because sometimes people say, well, that means you should have abortions. Like, well, the child's there alive and needs love and care. But I'm coming to this conversation from the lens of, what is the future of civilization? What is the purpose of life? What is all of this about? And I would say it's about other people. And any civilization, it's about family and children. And so is there a role for people who don't have kids? Of course. And is that a valid choice for some people? Absolutely. Yeah. But I think it has to be within the context of looking at this order that exists of family and the importance of it. And that includes strong marriages and the value of children. And I think a society that's not oriented around putting children first is unhealthy. And I'm not trying to, say, again, I haven't seen all of your content, but the way you were describing it, like, we don't have on mothers, we don't talk about that, because we're just focused on dinks. I understand what you're saying, but I think that if you're going to choose, I want to be child free by choice. Yeah. I would highly encourage anyone who is considering that, if they're listening to your podcast, to also consider that our deepest meaning is discovered in relationship.
I don't disagree with you on that.
I do think every woman is called to a kind of motherhood, if not biological, because some women can't have them or are not called to that. They are called to a spiritual motherhood where they're giving back and they're helping nurture other people to help them be who God created them to be, to help them grow. We were given that nurture. And I think our maturity as women is to be able to give back that nurture as we get older. Because of everything we've been given, then we can give that back. And that's the whole way, any civilization can continue and grow, is that when one generation gives back to the next and passes that on with love and sacrifice to the next.
So it sounds like you guys disagree profoundly on this particular topic. I have a question for you, Lila, unless you want to respond to that.
No.
Okay. So Lila, with the cost of living rising to what it is today, and so many people struggling to pay for basic necessities, like what Erika is saying, that this being a huge specific reason why people are choosing not to have kids, the issue of finances, struggling with debt. Do you recommend that people wait to have kids until more financially stable to have children?
That's a great question. And it is getting, I think in the last several decades, just economically, it's gotten very difficult for families more than it was 40, 50 years ago, because now it is challenging to have a family on a single income household. Yeah. And there also are, I think, just with the debt, and I talk about like the national debt, and then also the debt a lot of people find themselves in, especially if they go to college. These are all very challenging things. I think there's still, thankfully, pathways towards still saying yes to love, marriage, children, even with all the challenges. I think we need to promote policies that are helping families. Obviously, child tax credits are great, but I think cash subsidies, quite frankly, should be given to families. I do think we need paid maternity and paternity leaves, 100%.
We both agree on that.
1,000%. I could not agree more.
And I think birth should be free. I think that's a no-brainer. So I do think there's a lot, like, our tax system should think about, okay, what's the point of a government? Okay, yeah, maybe secure the national defense, whatever, of course. But the other purpose is, like, we want strong families. We want people to be able to flourish and have children and be able to raise the next generation.
Do you agree with that?
1,000%.
Amazing. So then I think federal policy and local and state policy should be focused on how do we best help families. And then I think nonprofits and other families can serve, especially more privileged families, can serve other families in their community. And I think that should be the focus of everyone. And then people who are not married, don't have their own children, I think they do have a purpose. Like we kind of ran over it because I know I was going off on another topic and we were talking about all these things, but you mentioned the women who want to get married. They'd like to have children, but they're struggling because they can't find that guy.
That's a whole other topic.
That is a whole other topic.
For another episode.
That could be an entire episode.
And it is super tough. I know so many of those women personally, and that is a real thing. And I said, there's hope, like hang in there, like don't give up hope. But, and I was just had a girl, one of my best friends on my podcast who got married at 40. She has 2 children. She had 2 miscarriages. She has 2 beautiful kids. She's 44 now, I think. Sorry, I forgot your birthday. I think she just turned 45. But anyways, she is, an example really beautifully of like hanging out there, not settling. Like you were saying earlier, I agreed with that about don't just say yes because you're desperate. That's not smart. But anyway, so it is possible. But the reason I'm talking about the single women who might be listening is if you're single, you're desiring marriage, you hope to, have children one day. You have incredible purpose today. Like be open to love, obviously, like keep the hope alive, but you have incredible purpose today. You can love, your friends, you can love your family. There might be wounds or issues with your family of origin or childhood, like discovering healing for that and forgiveness. If that's a path you need to go on, some of us have that struggle, or this is an opportunity to kind of get to know other married couples and love on them and their kids. I remember when I was single and there were definitely lonely days, I was like, okay, I'd like to get married one day. And I moved in with my sister-in-law and my brother to help them with their newborn babies. And that was just like, and I was still working. I still was doing other stuff, but that was a way I was like, this is some way that I can give back, even though I don't have this, in my life yet. Right. Yeah. So there's hope for everyone. Like everyone has a role to play.
Can I press on that a little bit? It sounds like you are elevating someone who wants to be married but isn't. Like they're single, they want to be married, but maybe not elevating someone who is choosing not to have it as like their choice.
Well, I think the question is why behind the choice. And maybe I'm not speaking as clearly to that we were discussing earlier. Like why are you choosing not to have children?
So that matters a lot.
I think that matters a lot.
So someone just says, this isn't right for me. It sounds like for you, it's like, I just know I wouldn't be able to do it as great as what you expect and hope that mothers can be. That is not good enough in your eyes.
Well, it's not so much about good enough. It's about what are the motivations underpinning and the life experiences underpinning that. And then I think it's also different whether you're married or not, because I think
you haven't gotten a chance to reply to that. I know you said you don't agree with that. Like obviously so your idea is that, not idea, but your position is that if you're choosing not to have kids, you should not be married. That is not many.
If you're choosing not to have married, you should not be. Meaning if you're married, you should be open to life.
Is that a really standard position to take in the Catholic Church? Because I don't know many people who feel that way.
Yeah. So, and again, we call marriage a lot of things today. So there's some people who go into marriage and they don't treat it like a marriage. So like, we might divorce, we might not. It's not for life. It's an open, so we're kind of using these terms and maybe we need to define them. So when I say marriage, I mean, this is for life. It's permanent. It's exclusive. It's faithful. So it's not an open marriage. It's not like I'm polyamorous or whatever. And I understand that some people do that, but I wouldn't consider that marriage.
Sure.
But if it is marriage, exclusive for life, permanent, I think a core part of marriage is to be open to life. And
so it's like being open to it rather than the fact that if it ever ends up happening or not, because not everyone ends up being able to.
Some people aren't able to have children because of infertility or other issues. So but the openness is the key.
Is that a standard position to take in the Catholic Church?
I think it is a Christian position to take. I think it's also a natural position to take because sex is designed for intimacy and lifelong bonding, and it's also designed to bring life into the world. So it's actually, in my view, the unnatural thing to do, separate from religious beliefs. It's the unnatural thing to do, to be, partnering with someone, intimate with someone, sexually, everything, and then to be constantly artificially sterilizing that and saying we're cutting off life. And in addition to that, we've mentioned abortion a little bit, and the reality is 50% of couples who have abortions, women who have abortions, are using contraception. And there are in the month that they got pregnant. So this idea that, well, I can just permanently sterilize myself. You can have a hysterectomy, that would be tragic, right? But this idea that, well, I'm 100% going to be child-free by choice, and it's totally fail-proof unless you're celibate, right? Or you've literally had a hysterectomy, right? You might get pregnant. Yeah. And tragically today, abortion is backup birth control for many people. And that's a life that's now that child. It's no longer child-free by choice. It's like destroy the child because they're inconvenient to me.
Do you think that this should be, you're welcome to respond to this specifically, but do you think we should take steps as a society to steer away from societal pressures to get married, have the white picket fence, and have the 2.5 kids? Well, actually, I think it's less than 2 kids now.
Yeah, it's less than 2 kids
now.
So
this is like a core value for you, though, being open to life. And always, and this includes even the topic of contraception, of not using contraception. Whereas for you, this is...
And also sex within marriage, because that's
right. Of course.
Like everybody just go out and have a baby. It's like, wait a minute.
That's very clear.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I would say, because I don't want to get into the muck and mire of abortion. I know it's something that you're very passionate about. I have my own feelings about it. I don't think that has to be the central conversation of this discussion. But I do think it's important to say that child-free by choice women take birth control very seriously because they don't want to be in a position where they might deal with an unwanted pregnancy. So I would dare to say the majority of our audience has done some kind of elective sterilization, be that a vasectomy or be that a hysterectomy, a tubal ligation, a bisal. There's all kinds of options. And I'm sure you have feelings about that, and that's totally fine. But I think it's important for people who have made this choice, who know that that's not something that they want to do, pursue motherhood, that they do things to be responsible for their own bodies, to make sure that they can, especially in today's climate, do the life that they want to do. That said, the white picket fence conversation.
Just that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
When you say in today's climate, it's especially important. I'm just trying to understand what do you mean by
where
that?
so many women don't have access to reproductive care.
So you're saying
a reproductive desert.
So you're saying that because are you talking about abortion when you say reproductive care?
Any kind of reproductive care, because it's becoming more challenging. I think it's important for women to be proactive in protecting their body to be able to pursue the life that they want to live.
So you're saying you guys would recommend sterilization to women because that means they don't need to have an abortion. Like if they get pregnant, they wouldn't have an abortion later, or
I have not.
Okay.
I've never had an abortion. I'm fine with abortion. I'll say that. I feel like I'm being dragged into the abortion conversation, and we can talk about abortion if you want to talk about abortion.
It is
I don't
connected,
think that
but yeah.
It's connected, but I don't think it's really the core of what we're trying to talk about today. And again, this wades really deep into people's decisions about their lives and how they want to live. And you do you, but like, I do not feel comfortable myself making judgments on how other people live their lives. And I think that's one place where we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I think, though, that it is responsible if somebody knows they don't want to have children and they want to do an elective procedure to make sure that they cannot have children. I think for a lot of women, it's a weight lifted off of them that they know, I'm never going to run into this issue. It's not going to be an accidental situation. It's not going to be a backup situation. I have peace of mind that I'm going to be able to live the life that I want. And I think that's great.
Okay. And what do you think about that question previously about societal? Do you think we should shift that societal mindset?
No.
Okay.
I don't think we should shift them. Okay. I think where we need to shift is in encouraging women, like I said before, to do what they think is right for themselves. I think that there is so much expectation put on women and so much pressure put on women that I think is unfair. I mean, we have barely touched on men in this whole conversation, you know? Isn't that interesting? That like, we're not talking about like expectations for a man, child-free men. We haven't touched on that at all.
Well, let's talk about it. What are your thoughts?
I think it's really interesting that it's not a conversation for men.
I mean, I do know men who talk about children a lot. So I do think it is. I mean, obviously men don't carry children. So in that sense, you're right. And but
they're just as involved.
Of course. I totally agree.
Deeply involved in this conversation?
100%. And it sounds like even what you were describing earlier, if I understood you correctly, is you and your husband made this decision together. So it's not like you made the decision and then your husband like respected it. It's
I made the decision in my late 20s and I went into dating relationships after that, so with the knowledge that I went to the table saying, this is what I see. Okay. This is how I feel. Mm-hmm. How do you feel? We had a lot of conversations over the first few months. He was in a similar situation where he had never been presented the option to not have kids. And I mean, I think it's unfortunate that like a lot of men seem to kind of just be floating through society being like, not being challenged to think about decisions the way that women are being challenged to think about things. And I
actually would love to do an episode like the same framework.
I think that would be great.
Think with a man and a dad.
It's a good idea.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. I would love that.
I think in general, we need to be pushing men to be having more of these like introspective thoughts, because I think it's a shame that they're not taking more accountability for the life that they want, you know? And in a sense, I think we're failing men in that way.
So then this is a follow-up question. Do you have something you want to reply to?
I mean,
that?
all kinds of thoughts, you know, but I do think this, you know, going back, I know you use the word judgment. Like, I don't want to judge other people and let people do what they want. Right.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, it's not coming and saying like, you're bad, you're good, you're bad. Like, no, you
did say that.
I'm saying certain things are bad. Okay. Like abortion is bad, I would say 100%. And going into life saying, and I know you said, well, that's not what people are doing. They're actually if you're doing DINK for the sake of DINK, I would say that is a problem. I think that's not good for you. If you're doing DINK because you believe and based on what you understand, this is what's going to best help other people. But I think at the end of the day, it has to be about loving other people. We obviously care about ourselves. We want to take care of ourselves.
Sorry. I want to interject here to ask a specific question about,
I think that life is most, we are designed as human beings to love God and other people. And when our life is about what I want first, and then other people second, and God maybe afterthought, whatever it might be, instead of what's God's calling on my life, and then how do I best love other people? And again, I'm not saying I'm not in your heart, you know, in mind, like I'm not here to say what's in your heart because I don't know, but I am saying that the societal narrative that being child-free by choice is this great thing. And, you know, the children, you don't have these children anymore. I think at the core of that is this message that children are a burden and that you're better off without them. Mm-hmm. And I think it should be more about what am I called to do to help love God and other people. Okay. And that for some people will include children and for others it won't. It's a shift of the framework, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is my question. I had like a moment where I was like, I want to ask this for you. Child-free people are often seen as selfish. So do you think that there are any selfish reasons to have kids? Should they still have kids even if their motivations are skewed? Because it sounds like what you're comparing here is the motivation. So if someone is choosing to not have children, that if their motivation is to serve other people and help others, then that is good. But if someone chooses to not have children for their own desires to vacation and have an easier life, that is not good. So would you say would you use that same moral compass for people choosing to have parents?
Yes. And a quick thing too, you know, having a child isn't necessarily going to fix, like you shouldn't have a child to fix you or fix it. The purpose of a child is for love, right? To love that child and that child have the opportunity to love too. So I think that's also important because I think we're talking about children as like kind of like this lifestyle choice. Like you have the child, you don't have the child. And I see it more, and this to answer the question too is, okay, marriage is designed for lifelong love and intimacy and for being open to life. Not every marriage can have children. Some struggle with infertility, but largely speaking, you get married, you're able to have children. That's a blessing. There to be a good thing. Human civilization has always operated this way. You need families, you need children, you need parents, mothers, fathers who love their children. And then there's some people who don't feel called to that, and they may choose to, and I think this is the other option, to be celibate. People that kind of straddle the line and say, well, I'm going to be sexually, you know, post-sexual revolution, we have contraception now, back up abortion. Oh, abortion's not in my state, so I'm going to get sterilized because that's more protecting me from getting pregnant. Whatever the decision framework is, right? I think that's it's very modern, of course. You know, that's kind of an experiment in human history. But beyond that, I think it's also deeply morally problematic because it's seeing sex not as this beautiful thing to bond people for life that can be open to life, but now sex is this recreational thing that I do on my terms, right? And then it's seeing our lives not about how do I live a purpose and give back and serve and love other people, but more about like, what do I want on my terms? So I know we're talking kind of very big picture here. And again, many different people, lots of like gray areas in this and different people's sense of calling and choices and personal circumstances. But I do think that those big picture principles is I think where we disagree. And I think those are the most important disagreements. All these kind of the details sometimes, you know, you might say, well, what about this girl's one particular case? And I'll say, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speak specifically in this way to her, but I think these principles are very important and I would argue are essential for a healthy human civilization and for human flourishing. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
it kind of did. Just about what do you think are the main reasons that people generally choose to have children? That's a real
today.
thing. Yeah,
I do think it's very varied. I don't think there's like one reason people have children. And I think, there's certainly a lot of people who get pregnant and they don't want to have children, and we have abortion. And I know you're like, well, let's not bring up abortion, but this is so tied in because it has to do with this baked in cultural view of children. It's just, and also a baked in cultural view of sex. And a culture that thinks sex is recreational, sex is really just about adult decision making, and doesn't recognize that sex often leads, not always, but often leads to life, new life. And then we don't have considerations for those new lives. I think that's a very broken, wounded culture. And that's what we're living in right now. We don't have to live that way, but that's in large part what we're dealing with. There's 3,000 abortions a day, 1 million a year in this country because of adult decision-making about sex. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. People saying, I don't want the kid, but I want to have sex. And then we have 1 million abortions. So, why do people choose to have children? There's a lot of reasons for that. I think, I would just encourage anybody who has a child, I want them to have a support system, and I want to do my small part to be support systems for people that I encounter. And then I want to also encourage them that you're doing an incredibly important thing, like by being a parent. And, it's something that you deserve to be cheered on for because we need you.
What are your thoughts?
On what part?
I know. It's a lot of areas.
Let's talk about the aspect of why women choose to be mothers, or fathers choose to be, what men choose to be fathers. Have you ever considered, could birth actually be quicker, easier, and even pleasurable? I'm here to tell you, yes, it absolutely can. If you didn't know, I'm a mother of 5 children and gave birth to all of my children in the comfort and safety of my home. And together with my sister, plus an incredible team of experts, including an OBGYN, doula, brain rewiring coach, and prenatal yoga teacher, we created the Empowered Pregnancy and Birth course. I poured my heart and soul into this course. It is my absolute passion to help expecting women have an easier labor and quicker birth, and most importantly, a birth that you love. In this course, we show you how to choose the right birth team and setting for you to give birth where you feel safest. You'll discover tools most people never hear about, from rewiring your subconscious beliefs about birth to practical tips that speed up labor and learning the secrets to avoid tearing. Birth isn't something that just happens to you. We are not passive passengers just along for the ride. You are in control in more ways than you realize. Birth is a skill, and you can direct the outcome in many ways, including how birth feels. If you're pregnant or planning to become pregnant soon, come join our course and gain the tools and confidence to help create the birth you envision. Visit theempoweredbirth.com to learn more and hear what our course students have to say. And just for my listeners on this podcast, you can enter the code EllenPodcast at checkout to get $50 off the course. It would be an honor to be part of your birth experience. You were made for this.
Well, okay. I think first and foremost, I would say a lot of what child-free people hear when they tell people, I don't want to have kids. Who's going to take care of you when you're old? Who's going to be there for you when you're on your deathbed? And to me, it's like, that's not why you have a kid. Like, that's not the purpose of a child. And so that narrative in itself, I hate. And I think that that's not something we should perpetuate. Kids are not a retirement plan. Kids are full-fleshed human beings who deserve respect and love. And I mean, not to bring my co-host into this, but her brother passed away. Like, there is no guarantee to what will happen to your children. Life happens. And so I do want to move away from that idea that kids are, as a society, I'm not saying anyone here is saying that, but as a society, I want to move away from this idea that, like, you have kids to fill some kind of expectation for your life. I do think there are some selfish reasons to have kids. I think to bring a child into the world so that you have someone to love you and care for you, basically anything short of I want to have a kid to be able to fully cherish and love that person, I think is a bad reason to have a kid. And I think people have children for all kinds of reasons, and I don't agree with all of them, but if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I think it's a little dangerous to set a bar so high for parents who want, because the desire to have a child is a very natural, innate desire for most people.
Next question.
It's natural and innate for most people, and I think to set the bar of only have a child when you're all these boxes are ticked. And again, I'm talking about in marriage, you know, you guys know where I am with the marriage stuff. So in marriage, which is beautiful, by the way. I mean, again, marriage is such an incredible thing that we should celebrate more too. But anyways,
I love being married.
I love being married. I know. It's such a beautiful thing.
You love it too.
It's amazing, right? But anyways, I think that, you know, you said children should not be someone's retirement plan. And I agree. You shouldn't go into, in the sense that there's a caveat here. It's a little bit nuanced in the sense that, like, when you have a child, you should want to put your child's best interests first before your own. I think that is true. And we should strive to that with our fallen human natures, right? But think about it. If someone else wasn't having a child, like when you are old, when I get old, let's say I didn't have kids and you don't have kids. Let's say Ellen doesn't have kids, right? We're all old. We all need health care. And we're like in our 80s or 90s, right? Someone needs to provide that for us. Someone needs to give certain care for us, and they're going to be someone else's children. Yeah. So even if your children aren't your retirement plan, in that sense, someone else's children are inevitably going to be part of all of our retirement plan, right? Retirement plan. Because that is the natural way that human beings develop, and that's the natural course of the human species and human civilization. So it's not to say like they're just utility and just use them. They're just like people to use. It's more just like, this is the natural circle of life, right? We have children, not all of us, but many of us. These children we love and nurture. We help them launch them. They have their own families, many of them who love and nurture. We get older. When we're older, some of us become like children because we age. And then the next generation does and should care for the elderly. We should have respect and profound care for the elderly. And that's not, oh, you're using kids in their retirement plan. That's the natural course of human life. And I think when we so individualize and autonomize ourselves, like, well, I'm just going to do what I want to do and my terms, right? I do think it's dangerous. I think it's ultimately not the natural order of love and relationship, because we are designed, and I know I sound like a broken record here, but we are designed for giving of ourselves for other people and focusing on loving and helping other people, not just, again, what we want on our terms. And there's a natural order to that for most people, which includes marriage and being open to children.
I have two questions here. It's so interesting because your one of your arguments is that women may choose to be mothers or parents. People choose to be parents for selfish reasons, and that's not good. And then your argument might be that people choose not to have children for selfish reasons, and that's not good. Isn't that interesting?
I love you. I mean,
that is like one of both of your core arguments.
I mean, I don't think that the majority of people go into it for selfish reasons, but I do think that the majority of people, again, I'm like, so is it okay to choose with like saying what other people feel or think?
This is all just like, you know.
Well, I'll just make a comment. Like you said on the show, like you do talk to, I think you said, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that you talk with women who regret their children.
We don't talk with people who have children, but we have talked about regretful parenting.
Okay, or that's kind of like a part of the data study that you provide, or you said there's many women maybe you didn't interview, but you've talked about who regret their children.
Men and women. Yeah.
Men and women. Yeah. So let's just think about what that actually means.
It's heartbreaking.
It's so very sad. Heartbreaking. So but what it means is that there's a human being out there and alive that they regret. So that's heartbeaking.
Well, that's where I would push back, because actually a lot of regretful parents actually say that they do love their children. They just regret the decision that they made. And that's the
decision of the child being alive.
It kind of feels like the same thing. Does that not feel like the same thing?
What do you mean?
That, I don't regret my child, but I regret the fact that I chose to have
they love their child.
Yeah.
But they regret that they exist.
They regret the decision.
What is the decision though?
Choosing to move forward with having a kid.
So they regret the decision to have the child exist.
I'm not disputing that. It's a difficult thing to understand.
Yeah, it's sad.
But
it's heartbreaking.
It's the reality for some mothers.
I think what I would do then there is get very curious about what's underneath that, because it's instead of just like, that's the way some people are. Okay. Like that means some women probably shouldn't have kids. Instead, get curious about why. Why do they feel so regretful?
Because hearing that, it sounds so bizarre to me as a mother. Like I can't even fathom that thought, because nothing is more important in my life than the children that I have. So that is a curious question of like, what happened in life that would cause that? It seems like something
there's going to be deep trauma or wounding, or, in some cases, maybe they're self-loathing because they hate how they parented the child. I mean, there could be a lot of factors. I'm not going to be I'm not the expert therapist here to tell you every factor, but I know I can say there's going to be a lot of different stories there. And I think the commonality is going to be some sort of something's broken, something's wounded. So I would just say, again, going back to, instead of like, this is some women's choice, it's how it is, I would say, well, why?
Would you agree that maybe something would be wounded in that case? Or is it just some people were meant to be and some people weren't?
Again, I don't think it's my place to say what is a wound and what is not a wound. My issue is, we do live in a society where overwhelmingly women are pressured to have children. I think that those realities are changing, but the current state of the world is most women feel a sense of pressure to have kids. And I think that pressure, I should say men and women feel a pressure, more so women than men. But regardless, I think that removing that pressure from people and allowing them to make decisions for themselves is going to take away a lot of that regret, hopefully, because I don't want people to feel that way. And I don't want their kids to exist in a house where their parents regret them.
Yeah, I guess I would say this side question of like, okay, pressure, they're being pressured and so they're doing things they shouldn't have done or didn't want to do. I think the deeper question is, because by the way, there can be good pressures, right? Like the societal pressure to not break certain laws is a really good one. Like, don't steal from the store. Your pressure to not steal. Good, right? So pressure isn't inherently wrong, especially there's some pressures that come within us, and it can be the voice of our consciences that's saying, ding, 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 don't do this. Like, ding, 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 that wasn't nice what you just did or whatever. And that's actually a gift we're given. So I think, we can make a distinction between shame, like living with a self-loathing. That's really toxic. And I would say that that's very bad. But certain pressures, especially ones that I think are God-given conscience and like healthy societal norms, that's actually for our good. It's not to make us feel miserable and locked up. It's to help us make good decisions that lead to our flourishing. So I would just be wary of this like language of, well, women feel pressured to have kids. I think a lot of the pressure is actually internal, where they want.
I fully disagree with you on that.
Okay, can you elaborate?
Yeah. We live in a patriarchal society where women are expected to have children. That has been the standard for centuries. I think to pretend like we don't live in a society where, like when I tell people that I'm child-free, like the number of questions that come up.
Yeah. That was one of my questions I was going to ask you.
There's so much stigma.
Well, I think to go around saying I'm child-free, it's kind of it's connecting the idea of not having kids to freedom. Like you're kind of in this elevated.
It is a sense of freedom.
Okay, let's have you elaborate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can finish
on the freedom piece. Oh, well, the other thing that I was going to say was
what
like,
you're going to say.
I mean, look at our comment section. The things that people, predominantly men, say to women who are child-free are disgusting, and it's like to pretend like they're like. That social pressure is good for all women is, again, like locking women, like because you're a woman, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And I just don't think that that's true. Like, I don't stand by that. And I think that's damaging to women. I think that's unhealthy to women. I think putting those pressures on women is a lot of toxicity, frankly. And I think women suffer because of it.
I think there might be a little talking past each other, because when I talk about good societal pressures, I'm not talking about every single woman lining up and being like, have a child. No, as I've said many times, not every woman's going to be called to have a child, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's some societal norms that are very good. And I think you would agree with this. Should a man who is the father of a child experience pressure to help provide for that child and not leave it all on the mother?
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about.
Well, we are talking about that because you're saying it's a patriarchal society and just women.
It is a patriarchal society.
But I would say our society, well, I would argue in many ways to say it's actually flipped. It's actually becoming matriarchal. But this idea that, well, women experience all the pressure and men don't experience any pressure. Like, men today have a tremendous amount of, and they should have a tremendous amount of responsibility. And women should have responsibilities. We all have different responsibilities. And when there's a child involved, both the mother and the father should have responsibilities for that child.
Sure.
I guess I would push back a little bit on this idea that every woman today is like, have a baby, like being told you have to have a baby. I think maybe you're more talking about it from the standpoint of you're a dual income, no kids childless by choice couple, and people were like, why aren't you having children? You know, I think that's more what you're speaking to. But I think the average girl, you know, woman is not, you know, who's 21 years old in college. It's not like everyone's banging down her door, have a baby right now. So
oh my gosh, when we got married, when are you having kids? When are
well,
you
I'm
having
talking
kids?
about when you
What's
get,
happening
well,
next?
yeah, because you're married. I'm just,
I mean, before we were married, it was coming up. Do you guys want kids?
Well,
when are you having
you're-
kids? When are you going to get married? You got to start settling down. Like,
Yeah.
that's totally woven into the narrative of our society.
I see what you're saying. And I think largely speaking, when you are in the beautiful vocation of marriage, you have this opportunity to meet someone you love, you're creating a stable home with them. I think it is the loving thing to do to be open to life. So then we do profoundly disagree there.
So
we do, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what the challenge is.
But that's not the
for
patriarchy. Me. That's human nature, and that's the course of
human
it's the
life. Patriarchy, given the fact that for much of society, women weren't allowed to make the choice for themselves because they were economically dependent on a man to be able to survive. If you can't open a bank account, if you can't own property, if you can't have a business, if you can't do any of these things without the support of a man, yeah, you're tied to a man. Yeah, you have to fulfill his legacy. That's patriarchy.
So do you think that it's natural and biological for women to want to be mothers? And and if it is natural, are we ignoring that biological pull and adjusting because of how society has shifted?
I love this question so much. To me, it's not a binary. And I understand that you may disagree. I think you have made it clear that you disagree. I think let me first start by saying, I actually would encourage anyone who's really interested in this idea of like baby fever, maternal instinct. The journalist Ruby Warrington did a really great conversation with a biologist, Jillian Ragsdale is her name, I want to say, where they were discussing this idea of if your brain was wiped and you were dropped on an island, your biology would be seeking food, water, shelter, probably sexual desire. You wouldn't be naturally inclined to say, I want a baby. I got to find me a baby. I got to find a way to have a baby. And I don't think that most mammals are having sexual intercourse because they want to have a baby. I think we engage in intercourse, and enough intercourse could result in a baby. So there is an element of biology to that. But similar to what you were saying earlier, well, let me back up for a second just to say, I struggle with the idea of like it's universally natural and biological because I don't have a maternal urge. I'm now 38. When I see babies, like I've never been a baby person. When I see babies, they kind of like give me the heebie-jeebies. Pregnancy makes me uncomfortable. And I see you looking very sad, and I'm sure that's sad for you. And perhaps you're assuming that I'm wounded. I had a great childhood. I have 2 nieces. I have a nephew. I'm so stoked for other people. For me, myself, it's not the vibe. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think some people are tocophobic, which is the fear of pregnancy. That is also biological. So I think the beautiful thing about being human is our ability to, at times, when necessary, rise above our biology. Some people have a biological urge to overconsume alcohol. We would encourage them to not do that. Perhaps if your child was put at risk, you would feel a biological urge to hurt somebody else. And we would hope that you could minimize that urge for the sake of the morality and legal structures that we've created as humans. I think for myself, I feel a sense of freedom that I am able to logically reason what is best for me and what it would be best for my theoretical children and come to a conclusion that works for my life. So I think it's totally natural and biological for some people, but I think I would push back on exclaiming that is a universal experience when so many women do not experience a maternal urge.
I think that there is sort of biology and like biological urges, like I'm hungry, give me some food. But I think the desire to mother is not like I'm hungry, give me some food. Although you can like look at a baby and be like, that's such a cute baby, and feel this like desire to like hug a baby. That's beautiful. But I think there's something deeper at work, which is the soul. And I think we all have souls, which it interacts certainly with our biology, but it's, you know, it's our mind, it's our heart, it's our soul, however you want to use the word. And I think the human soul is designed for love of God, to be loved by God and to love God and love of other people. And for most human souls, that includes a vocation to marriage and children. And so again, that doesn't mean everyone will, but that means it is a vocation for most people. And so I do think when we resist, perhaps there is, and again, everybody's going to have a different story. So I don't know, I haven't been in your shoes. I don't know your whole life and all your experiences. You say, well, I thought I would have kids, and then I saw these really tragic situations in foster care, and then I decided not to have children. If I heard you say that correctly earlier, if I understood that correctly, you know, I don't know all of the details of your life, but I will say that I do think it should be innate to every person to want to love. And I think we would all agree with that. I think it is innate to most people. If they have trouble loving, then I think there's something wounded there for sure.
I think there's a difference between a biological need to be in community and a biological need to be a parent.
Right. And I think, you know, for example, when I had, just to use myself as an example for the biological urge, like when we had our first baby, it wasn't like, I have baby fever, I have a biological urge, give me this baby. It was more that I'm married, I love my husband, we're open to life, and if we are blessed with a baby, we're going to love on this baby. Even if everything isn't perfect, we're just going to love and receive this gift, right? So the framework isn't about like, I have this urge and I'm going to respond to this urge with this act. Because by the way, you can't like perfectly plan a baby anyways, right?
Yeah, right.
But it's the framework, you know, I think the truth is we're designed for love. For most of us, that is within marriage and having children. That's not everyone's story, but for most of us, that's been the course of human history. The stuff about the patriarchy and, well, now we can finally be broken free of that structure. I don't buy that. I think that, you know, there have been oppressive systems specifically against women in this country, and we were able to do away with a lot of those in the early 20th century. But I think largely speaking today, women are doing great compared to our male counterparts. You know, we graduate college more. We have, you know, incredible opportunities that, you know, throughout human history we haven't had. And I think it's a tragedy if we say we have all this freedom, like here we go. And then we're saying, well, good riddance children. Our forebears had to have these kids, but we don't have to have them because we're bucking off the patriarchy. I just think that's not.
I just don't think
that's true freedom.
What I'm saying, what most child-free people are saying.
Why so much focus on the child-free? Like we have to be free of these children. Like what is it about the child that is so? Like the word "free" there is such a powerful word. Everyone loves freedom, right? That the child is makes you not free. Like why is being child free this status that you think is such a good one for dinks?
Well, first and foremost, I'll just say like I'm a neurodivergent person. I have health conditions that I wouldn't want to pass on to a child. I think for me, knowing myself, my ability, which again is the only person I can speak for, I know I would be overstimulated and it would be a negative for me, and that would impact my child. And I think we have this, again, like misconception that like, I feel like we are demonizing child-free people, when in reality, if you're making this choice because you don't want to harm a child, that's compassion. And I don't want us to I don't want us to forget that it's a compassionate choice to say, for any multitude of reasons, I don't want to cause harm on another life because I don't feel like that's the right calling for me. I understand that you see it as, you know, subhuman or problematic.
Not subhuman. Yeah.
I mean, you've painted a pretty broad brush of like what you think is the correct status in life. And I think that's fine if that's your perspective, but I think it's really challenging to say, like, because you've said so many times in this conversation, and I appreciate, I don't know your heart, I don't know your life, I don't know your story. But when you say that, and then in the same breath say, but women, people should do X, Y, and Z in order to be right with God, right with the universe, right in their in social standing, I think that really hurts people. And I think, like, again, this like,
so you think so
this
just,
perpetuates this notion that women should have children. And if they're not having children, that there is something wrong with them, that they're wounded, that they're damaged. And I just don't think that's true.
But just to be clear, I haven't said, and maybe we're talking past each other, I'm not saying all women should have children.
I understand that, but you've said multiple times, like, oh, if you're not going to have children, you should be celibate.
Yes, I do think that's true. Yeah,
that's a
question about sexual ethics, which we haven't gotten directly into.
I don't think that's a fair thing for you to put on anybody else. That's a personal choice, and for you to say, like, I am allowed to say what is right and wrong for another person is like.
Well, and that brings up the abortion conversation again, because again, sex is, and I think the reason that I say that, it's not to say, oh, you know, I want to, what it comes down to is, what is sex designed for? What is sex designed for?
Well, most human sex is not during a reproductive cycle. So I think it is
very true
for fun, for pleasure, for connection. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for sex. Humans are unique in the fact that we have sex for a lot of reasons outside of reproductive.
And I totally agree that sex is and can be so incredibly fun, beautiful, intimate, all of these things. But, and then you said outside of the reproductive window, but, you know, a woman who's healthy, right? She's going to have a ability to bring life into the world, or if she isn't struggling with infertility. And so sex is designed, it is the way for thousands of years that children, the next generation of human beings, come into the world. And so that is baked into sex. Not every sexual act, of course, but it is baked into sex. That's how we got here. And so this idea that you can just totally divorce sex from children and life and all of this, and you were even saying it is hard because you're saying we're recommending the DINKs get sterilized so that they don't have to have an abortion because there's no abortion legal in the state they might be in. I mean, you were kind of going down that route earlier, and that's what you're basically saying there is like, yeah, we know sex can bring life into the world. And if it does, we want there to be a backup plan of abortion. And if it's illegal, all the more reason to permanently sterilize yourself so you can't ever have kids. And then I also wonder, well, what if they regret that decision at some point, you know, later in their life, the sterilization?
Again, there's just one person that's impacted by that, and that's the self. We all have regret in life, and that's part of being human.
Well, we're here to talk about other people.
Yeah. For yourself, it's different than when you're coping with it with a child in the room.
You mean, so you're saying that, because you were mentioning yourself personally, you have neurodivergence. You were saying, I don't want this to pass on to a child. That's one of the reasons that you've gone into chosen this. Yeah. And I hear that. And I've had many conversations with people who are like, can I be the parent that I feel like I need to be? And this gets into very kind of personal gray areas, which is totally, real. Everybody's going to have their own issues. But I think, again, we're kind of zooming in personal, and then we're talking broad strokes. And I do think the principles matter. And that's why I keep coming back to them.
Yeah. And I think that's why I feel like you can't have broad strokes on how you want to define somebody else's life. We need to have a sense of neutrality in society so that people feel the freedom to make the decision that is right for them. I think when we do elevate child-free people, or we do elevate mothers over somebody else, we're causing harm on people. And that's why we advocate for people to make the choice that is best for them. I'm not here to tell anyone what is right and wrong for their personal life. I don't have that authority. I don't want that authority. And so I think the more that we can push for women to feel free to be the expert of their own life, the better.
I do think your position has a lot of contradictions in it, though, because you're saying on the one hand, you're not going to tell other people.
I think yours does too.
Well, let's talk about that. Sure. I think you're saying, well, I don't want to tell other people what's better, this or that, or what's good, this or that. But I do think you have a lot of opinions about what's better and what's good. I mean, you have very strong opinions about men and their roles and what they should do. And then, you've spoken to that a little bit, but then you're saying for women, it's really, there are no just to make sure I'm understanding you, because you were talking about this, you're saying women don't have any sort of responsibilities and we should kind of do whatever we want, or you're just saying
Where did I say that?
Well, you're saying that you just want to be neutral. You're saying you want to be neutral, and I'm trying to understand how neutral are you wanting to be neutral?
I'm being neutral in the fact that we shouldn't elevate one position as right versus wrong. I think both choices are good if that's the choice that's good for you. And when it comes to men, I'm not here to tell men this is how you should be, but I want men to feel permission to be an active player in their lives. And I think for a lot of men right now, they feel a sense of passivity, and I don't think that's good for anybody. I would say the same for women.
But I think you would be concerned, or would you be concerned about a man who was a non-participant in his own child's life? I'm going to guess. You would think you have a responsibility to that child.
I think if you're choosing to bring a child into the world, you have a responsibility to that child. And that's true for men or for women.
And then would you say that you would think it would be totally fine and healthy if everyone woke up one day and were like, Ellen and I are like, yeah, it's a lot of work. We want to be dinks, right? And everybody just like listened to the podcast, said we want to be dinks, right? I'm just saying thought experiment.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be a good thing?
I love your thought experiment. That's never going to happen.
But would it be a good thing if it did happen?
That's not for me to determine. It would be a good thing in the sense that people would be doing what was right for them. I don't think any of us should wake up and say, I'm going to have a baby because population decline is a real problem. And when you give birth, you're like, this is going to be great for the economy. Here's my little baby who's going to be a good little worker. No one should say that.
I think
that's
not why most people.
But it's the same
because
on
it's
the
more
flip
of a natural
side. That's
thing.
why if we go too far on either side, it's bananas. That's why, we should be pushing for balance. We should be pushing for nuance, because the more we say this is the right way, no, this is the right way, it only hurts people.
Yeah. But I think you've staked out ground though that does have, strong. I would say principles connected to it. And one of those principles is that you even just said it actually. You said, I don't think that mothers or having children should be elevated above someone who chooses not to have children for whatever reason. And it's basically they're completely, totally valid, both it's neutral, it's all the same. And I would say, yes, in the sense that some people will be called, and I think if they really get in touch with God and everything, they may be called to not be get married and be a biological mother. But I do think we are all called to live lives of love and sacrifice for other people.
I 1,000% agree with you on
and so that in that sense, there's a strong principle there. And I think we need to, the people who choose not to have children because they feel that God's, again, this is, I wouldn't say this is the DINK, because I know we've discussed, I don't think we should get into, I don't think it's a good lifestyle to have. I think it isn't good. But for people that decide we're going to support families and mothers and fathers and families, I think that's can be a very good and beautiful thing. But I think it needs to be oriented towards the next generation. All of us should care about the next generation in this room. All of us should care about supporting families and having healthy and thriving marriages. I don't think it's just like what's best for me. I guess that's maybe the foundational philosophical disagreement here.
Yeah,
you're kind of saying let everybody decide for themselves what's best for me. Yes, in the sense that we are all called to make decisions for our life. We are given each of our lives. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's principles that should govern all of us.
Yeah.
In how we behave and the choices that we make.
I think what I'm saying when I say I'm doing what's best for me is I'm doing what is necessary for me to show up to the world as a loving, caring human being. And I think that there are definitely circumstances in my life that would cause me to struggle in being a functioning member of society for my personal ability set. And that's the thing is we live on a spectrum. Everybody has a different level of capacity, different level of resources, different level of, personal sacrifice that they can bring to the table, and I think that that's why we need to encourage people to be in tune with themselves and recognize what do you need to do to show up to the world and care for the planet in a way that's responsible and loving? How are you going to show up to be part of a community? Because I don't think anyone's choosing to not have children so that they can completely separate from society. Like, if anything, I think that people are doing it so that, like I said, they can be teachers, nurses, pediatricians, people who are serving the community to the best of their ability.
I have a question back when you asked her about men who have children. Do they have a responsibility to take care of that child?
Yeah.
What about a man who the woman chose to have her child, but he wasn't necessarily wanting to be a father? Does he also have a responsibility in your mind to take care of that child?
Again, I think from a legal perspective, yes.
But should that be a law, I guess, would be the question. Is that a good law?
I'm not a politician. I don't feel like this is my area of expertise to weigh in. I think there are smarter people who can weigh in on that.
I think that connects back to the point that I'm trying to make, which is that we all have responsibilities. Yeah. And we should have responsibilities to the next generation. And even if we are not I fully 100% decided this, there are going to be things in our life, like in this scenario, a man, and society still says you still owe a duty.
Sure.
Even if you don't choose it. And so that's this radical autonomy, what I want, was really the end game versus this is the natural course of human life. We have responsibilities to each other. Some of these are very natural and come into play with marriage and children. Not everyone's called to that, but for many of us, we are. And we should embrace that even with all of the challenges. I know neurodivergent parents, as an example.
And I do want to be very clear.
I have
if you're low income, if you're neurodivergent, and that's what you want, that's great. I'm only speaking for myself that I know I would be a nightmare. So that's where the limitation comes. I have to make a choice on what I feel comfortable to do. If somebody else feels comfortable doing that, more power to you.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I will say, I think our choices affect more than just ourselves. And so if I go out there and I'm I'm deciding, and you do this publicly, you have a very public podcast, and you say publicly, I'm deciding to do X for these reasons, right? You're representing yourself as an example, inevitably. Now you might say, well, you can do what you want, but this is what I'm doing, and this is why, and there's all the data and all the examples and the good reasons for it. It is making a case for a particular position, right? And so our choices do affect other people. Our examples do affect other people. And again, I would let's lean on the side of saying yes to life, saying yes to love, saying yes to commitment. And
but I don't feel like I'm saying no to life and love and commitment by choosing to be child-free. I think that's a misconception.
Well, you're by the nature of the definition of what you are identifying as, you are saying no to children. You are saying no to life.
That's your perception. That's not my perception.
Okay. So you're saying you're not saying no to children.
I am saying no to my own children, but I'm not. I have nieces. I have nephews. I love them. I have kids in my life.
Okay, I want to move on to a question for you, Lila. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 2/3 of American families with children have both parents working. With the average household in America having both parents working, is this ideal for children? I know that you say that you and your husband both work. What are your thoughts on daycare? So many people have kids and then they're put in daycare so young and then sent to school so young that they don't spend much time together. And is this ideal for families?
Yeah, I think it's very tough. And, daycare is some families that use daycare. I know there's a lot of ambivalence about it and feelings, negative feelings about it because they don't feel like it's natural to be dropping their, 6-month-old off at nature. And I would say, it isn't natural to have to do that. And I'm a big proponent of, again, better federal and state policies that empower mothers to get longer paid family leave, cash subsidies for kids, things we were talking about earlier. I think it's difficult. And I think that is something that we should all be aware of. And if we have privilege, we can help other families that may be struggling. But I do think there's a way. And I have seen this play out time and time again where, that dual income family, they make the decision that we're going to change our lifestyle, maybe move, shift careers so that we can be, maybe the mother's still bringing in money. She has side jobs, but her work is more flexible so that she can be there for her very young children. And I do encourage women, even before they get married and have kids, to find careers where there is flexibility, where they, if they're into nursing, maybe they work one shift and they have a family member who can help watch the baby that one day, or there's different arrangements. And again, I'm not saying it's easy, but I do think there's ways to make it work even in today's economy. It's more of a gig economy today. I would recommend and encourage moms to discover, gigs that they can do that are more flexible with their job, with their families. But I think it is good for moms to be with their kids as much as possible. And this doesn't mean like every hour, every day. Yeah. I'm obviously here, not with my kids right now, right?
Me too.
We're very blessed, I know, with people that we totally trust to love and be with our kids. But yeah, it's going to be complex. Like a lot of these things are. So,
I mean, I know that I'm a broken record, but like I want women to be able to do what they want to do. I think
the question for children.
Yeah.
Like making this question about, is this good for children? Yeah. Do you have a problem with this? Having children while being away from your children. I know you're not a parent yourself.
I don't have a problem with it. No, yeah. I mean, look, I'll be the first to say that I think that like we want to talk about what's natural and biological. Like, I don't think working 40 hours a week is like natural or like good for anybody's biology. I think the structure of work that we have in this country is really unhealthy and really damaging. Not just for people, but for children. And like I said before, like I'm the first to say we need more maternal and paternal leave. We need better access to universal health care. I mean,
yeah, you both agree with that.
Is like choice. We need better access to like affordable childcare for sure, but also like housing. I think so much of the structure of our society is putting families at risk. And I think that's something that is very serious. And, as a child-free person, like I'm happy to pay more taxes so that my friends' kids can have better education, can have more access to better technology. Like, I think those are important things.
Do you guys think that if our government supported families better, that people would have more children? Because, for example, European countries that have paid family leave and things like a longer maternity and paternity leave, they still have quite low birth rates.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. I think that the government has a role to play, but that's not honestly the biggest role. I think the biggest role is not the government's role. The biggest role is our perspective spiritually, even as human beings, on what is the meaning of life. Is my life about, for many of us again, and most of us, marriage and family, or is it about whatever I design? Like it can be this, DINK lifestyle. I mean, whatever it is, right? Like I'm going to just design my own life this way. And again, like it's not to say like many of the things you're doing sound like they're awesome. Like it sound like they're wonderful things. If you're, doing work to serve the community, help other people, whatever it is, you're doing creative stuff that you enjoy. That's all beautiful. But I think when we present it as a binary that you can't do those things if you have a family, that's what women are wrestling with today. And I think that's really bad, because if women are thinking, oh, if I get married and have kids, then I can't do all of these wonderful fruits of feminism, like, get to have an education and a career and do all these wonderful, exciting things. Like if we say that to women, then we are actively disincentivizing motherhood. We're actively disincentivizing the very thing that is what uniquely makes us women, our ability to mother, different from men, and the thing that we need for the future of civilization.
What brings you the most fulfillment in your life? I want to ask you both this. And what is the purpose of life? And I know it's such a broad question, but I do think it's an interesting point to this conversation.
I think that's why like this conversation is a little frustrating, because it feels like you're saying that a person's life is not connected to society and love if they're choosing to not have children. And I think that's fundamentally false. For me, I think, the three fundamentals of the way that I structure my life is like, first, internally, making sure that I'm checking in with myself, understanding my capacity, my self-awareness, healing myself, doing the internal work that I need to do to be a functioning member of society. Then next to society, to the people in my life, to my community. I spent a lot of time both in political activism, but in my local community, organizing events for families, organizing basic things like the structure of how our city is like set up. And not to say that a mother cannot do that. Obviously, I work with so many moms on our neighborhood association board, on, like the school board, things like that. I think moms that are doing that are like superheroes. And I say that because I know that I don't have that capacity. And I don't want anyone to feel the pressure that if they can't do that, that they're like less than. And then the third thing that I would say is the purpose of life is like making sure that we're good stewards of the planet, making sure that we're caring for the one planet that we have, for the animals that are here, for the environment that we have, and making sure that we're sustaining it to the best of our ability.
What about you?
What is the purpose of life?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm the broken record.
And what brings you the most fulfillment in life?
I think the purpose of life is to love God and be loved by him, and to love other people. And there's natural orders to that are built into our nature. Women uniquely have the power to be mothers. Men uniquely have the power to be fathers. Not all of us are going to be that biologically, but I think we're all called to that spiritually. And most of us are called to, I think, get married. Again, I understand it really stings for a lot of people who are like, I want to get married. Well, Lila, where's my, you're saying that, but I can't find a guy. So that's its own challenge in our unique cultural chaos today, right? But I think it's very natural and beautiful and good for that desire that most people have. And I think that, most people are, who get married, everyone who marries, I believe, is called to be open to life. And that is the way that any civilization can grow and thrive, because families are considered the focus of the whole project. Why do we have, a planet? Why do we want a good government? Why do we want good school boards? Why do we want to have, good NGOs and good schools and everything else? It's because of children. We want to have a beautiful earth for the children. We want to have a beautiful, wonderful schools and a government for the children, families first for the children. So I think the purpose of life is love, and we have to put children's needs first and build structures for children. And all of us are called to care about children, whether we are married and we are open to life and our kids and loving other people's kids and families, or we are living a celibate vocation and we love in a different way.
Erika, do you or your partner ever have moments or days where you think you might want to have kids, and do you ever worry that you may regret choosing not to have children when you're older?
I mean, the honest answer is, I think the older we get, the more grateful we are for the life that we have. I only become more confident in my choice as I get older. And if I get to that point where I feel like I have a sense of regret, I'll deal with that then.
Okay. And for both of you, do you think there is more regret in people who have children or those who choose not to have kids? Surveys that I found, just to preface before you guys answer, is that young parents are more likely to regret having kids, while older parents are more likely, over 55, are less likely to regret having children.
I saw this, I forget the actor, or it was a singer, and she's like, all my friends who are married that have very young children are regretting it. She's kind of talking on some talk show about, young mothers saying like, I'm in over my head, it's exhausting and all of this. And if you ask a mother right after she's given birth, or like when she's in her worst sleep, it's like, how many kids do you want to have? They'll be like, this is more than enough. Like, it's like, this is a lot, right? Because you're in it, right?
Yeah.
But it's so interesting, that study you just referenced, or the different studies, because, I can understand when you're down and out, if you've got multiples, there's screaming, there's sleepless nights, whatever the difficult thing is, right? To be like, oh, I dream about those days when it was just me and I could sleep in and do whatever I wanted, right? I understand it's very human, because you
have to take care of yourself.
You got to take care of yourself. And by the way, I think a lot of expectations for postpartum moms are just like through the roof today, back to the maternity leave question and whatever else, right? That being said, I think there is social data that shows that people do regret not having kids later, as they get later in life, because they start to realize that I'm getting older. It's not about a retirement plan. It's about what's the meaning of life. And all those fun things that I wanted to do that I maybe can't do as much anymore, or things that I care about shift because I know like death is coming. Like, we're all going to die, right? So then you start to really be faced with your mortality, and you're like, what's the point of all of this? And a child is a gift from God that is the future, right? Of humankind, of course. But it's more than just like the future of humankind. It's also about our eternal destiny. And I believe we're designed to be in communion with God forever in heaven. I think that's what we are all called to if we're willing to receive it. And what that looks like on this earth is saying yes to love even when it's hard, including a child's life, even when it's hard. So when you're having those sleepless nights, you're like, I'm saying yes to love and life, even when it's hard. And this is the meaning of life.
And, that survey isn't necessarily speaking to someone who doesn't have any children, but on a personal level, I have, since I have a lot of kids, I have 5, I've been a lot of couples who will say something to me along the lines of, we stopped at 2 because we were so in the thick of it. And we just thought we're good, we're done. But now that they're older, I'm like, dang, we should have went for 1 or 2 more. We should have kept going.
I've got to just share this really quickly. I was talking to someone who it was their brother is a doctor or their father is a doctor. Anyways, they were saying the number one thing that people on their deathbed told them they regretted was not having more children.
That's so interesting. And that doesn't pertain to exactly the topic of no children versus children, because it is different.
Yeah.
Like someone who wants children and then they're in the thick of it and they're like, okay, I'm good, I'm done. Like this was a lot, But the reality is, at least from what I've seen, people who, a lot of people share things with me like, well, you had a lot of kids.
I know who told me that. That reminded me, this is a person and they are one of 9 kids. And it was in this situation that it was the mother dying, and every night there was another child with her, and there was a family member, this large extended family. And so that prompted the doctor to say, yeah, this is very unique that you have this, right? This is very beautiful and special that you have this. And the number one regret of people that he serves on their deathbed say regret not having that.
Yeah, and I think it's just speaks to the survey about when you're older, you're no longer in the thick of the hardest parts, and you get to have just things get a little bit easier, and you have that relationship with your children, and being like, dang, we should have kept going. But anyways, sorry, you go ahead and.
I mean, I think where we would agree is life cannot be something that is vapid and self-serving. I think at the end of the day, people need to find what brings them meaning, and if you're choosing to have a life where you're not having children simply so that you can have more disposable income or go on more vacations, I do think at some point that could become empty, but I don't think that's the reality of most people who are choosing not to have kids. I think most people who are choosing not to have kids, the Women's Philanthropy Institute said that, child-free couples donate 5 times more than couples with kids to nonprofits and charities. And so it's you have to center your life around a bigger picture, and that can look like a lot of different things. And I think if I am lucky enough to live a long life, I hope that I have so many meaningful memories of the ways that I spent my time, as well as people in my community who I've impacted who want to be there for me. At the end of the day, I need you as much as you need me, and we do need to see each other as a village and recognize that we have to come together to serve the greater purpose of our society.
I agree. I love that.
Great. Well, as we round out, I have one more question for you both. If there's anybody listening who's on the fence, deciding whether they should have children or should not have children, what do you want to say to them? Is there any missing things you'd like to tell them that they haven't heard yet today, or that you'd like to close out in recommendation for someone looking to decide whether they should have children or not?
I would say I think there is a trend today for some people who want to have children completely on their own terms outside of marriage. They use reproductive technology sometimes to do it. And I wouldn't say having a child at any cost is the way to go for every soul. Of course not. I think I've said that many times in today's conversation. But I would say be open to life, be open to love, largely speaking. And for you that are married, I'll just speak to the married couples who went into marriage with the desire that this is lifelong, this is exclusive, I'm one flesh with this person, and they're thinking, oh, but I don't know if I want to have these kids. I don't know if I want kids. And I can speak very specifically to those people if they're listening. I know it's a very small group.
That's what I was pertaining to.
Okay, great. And I would just say for you, the one flesh that you have with the person that you love, is embodied in that child. And that's such an incredible gift. And I think that there is nothing more amazing in the world than a new human life. And it's a privilege to care for that life. And you're not going to be perfect. No one's perfect. And the circumstances aren't going to be perfect. They never are. But saying yes to life opens up dimensions of love and adventure and joy that otherwise you probably would never touched on, that we would not have been possible otherwise. So I'd say it's amazing. It's and a huge blessing.
I think I would say trust yourself. You're the expert of your life and you know yourself best.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you guys both so much. I found this conversation riveting and very, very interesting. I'm super fascinated by this topic. And you both, I think, presented your sides very well. I found you both very, very fascinating individuals and what you have to say. And I'm just so glad we did this and got together. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
for
it.
sure.
Thank you, Ellen.
All right. Bye.